In December of 2024, China quietly flipped a switch, and overnight the United States lost access to a metal essential for ammunition, energy storage, and fireproofing the modern world. Most investors never noticed, but inside defense agencies, supply chains, and mining boardrooms, the alarm bells were immediate. Because this wasn't just another export restriction. This was a choke point, a single decision that exposed how fragile Western supply chains had become and how few domestic sources existed to replace them. Welcome to Junior Mining Gold, the podcast where we dig deep into the raw, unfiltered world of building fortunes from the ground up. I'm your host, Dusty Nugget, the guy who's ridden more boom and bust cycles than a rodeo cowboy on a bull named Recession. If you're new here, we don't sugarcoat the grind. We expose the guts of business, from solo hustles to empire-building shares. Before we dig into the dirt, this episode is brought to you by juniormining.gold. Are you tired of missing the boat on the next big discovery? Juniormining.gold is your ultimate radar for the high-stakes world of small-cap mining. We track the drills, the assays, and the movers so you don't have to. If you want an edge, head over to juniormining.gold. Now, let's get to the gold. Today's episode is called China's Antimony Ban Just Created America's Next Mining Unicorn. And I want you to keep one mental model front and center as we walk through this. Supply chains don't break gradually, they break suddenly. And when they do, the projects already positioned to deliver become exponentially more valuable overnight. Antimony is one of those metals most investors have never thought about. It doesn't have copper's fame or lithium's hype, but without it, modern infrastructure doesn't function safely. Nearly 40% of U.S. antimony consumption goes into flame retardants, critical materials that keep electronics, industrial equipment, and military systems from igniting under stress. Another 40% goes into antimonial lead alloys, which are essential for ammunition primers and energy storage. The rest supports specialized uses in glass, semiconductors, and industrial materials, where reliability isn't optional. Antimony isn't a luxury input, it's a safety-critical input, and more importantly, there are no effective substitutes at scale. The United States consumes roughly 24,000 metric tons of antimony every year. Domestic production? Zero. For decades, the entire system depended on imports, primarily from China, which controls between 50 and 60% of global mine production and even more of the refining capacity. Then, in December of 2024, China pulled the lever. Export restrictions targeting U.S. supply chains immediately reshaped the market. What had been a quiet dependency became an urgent vulnerability. And that's when antimony stopped being an industrial metal and became a national security asset. Here's where most investors miss the real story. Supply chains don't respond instantly. Mines take years, sometimes decades, to permit, finance, and build. Even the largest Western antimony projects won't deliver meaningful production until the late 2020s. That creates a timing gap, and in commodities, timing gaps create asymmetric opportunities. The global supply picture underscores the urgency. The largest known deposits are overwhelmingly concentrated in geopolitically challenging jurisdictions. China's reserves have more than 2 million tons contained antimony, with refinery capacity of 10,000 tons per year. Russia has about 200,000 tons. Tajikistan fields hold hundreds of thousands of tons, supporting 15,000 to 25,000 tons annual national output. Bolivia's historic reserves are significant, but largely dormant since the 1980s. These established sources cannot be relied upon for secure Western supply chains. Meeting future demand therefore requires a multi-pronged strategy centered on rapid domestic and allied mine restarts, expanded recycling, byproduct recovery, policy acceleration, and selective international diversification. The most immediate gains are expected from advanced projects in the United States, Australia, and Canada, including Perpetua Resources' Stibnite Gold Project targeting 2028-2029 at 35% of U.S. demand, Larvotto Resources Hillgrove targeting Q2 2026 at 5,400 tons per year, U.S. Antimony Corporation's restart, and smaller contributions from Costerfield and Canagold. Recycling already supplies 15-18% of U.S. demand and could reach 25 to 30% within a decade. Collectively, These efforts could push North American and Australian supply toward 15,000 to 18,000 tons annually by 2030, 2035, cutting net reliance on China-dominated sources from 85% to well below 50%. However, the narrow window to 2027 to 2028 creates an opening for ultra-near-term domestic producers capable of military-grade output in 2026. Right now, the Western world is scrambling to rebuild antimony supply from scratch, and when supply disappears faster than production can respond, prices don't just rise, they structurally reset. This is where geology meets opportunity. In Alaska's Fairbanks mining district, one of the most prolific gold regions in North America, a junior explorer made a discovery that wasn't supposed to be the main event. They were chasing gold, but what they found instead were massive stibnite veins, the primary ore of antimony, with grades exceeding 50% antimony in multiple intercepts. To understand how unusual that is, consider that global antimony mines often operate at grades between 1 and 5%. This system wasn't marginal, it was extraordinary. Mineralogical analysis showed something even more important: purity. Nearly 90% of the rock consisted of antimony-bearing minerals. That matters because high purity translates directly into lower processing costs, higher recoveries, and faster paths to production. Metallurgical testing confirmed the next critical milestone. The ore could produce military-grade antimony concentrate, the exact specification required for defense applications. Hydrometallurgical processing pathways demonstrated recoveries approaching 98%. In other words, this wasn't just a geological discovery, it was an engineering-ready system. When we modeled the system volumetrically, using structural mapping, trench sampling, drill intercepts, and density assumptions, we estimated a proto-resource potential ranging between 19,000 and 42,000 tons of contained antimony. Surrounding the core antimony veins sits a gold halo, adding an additional economic layer with tens of thousands of ounces of contained gold. But here's the most important variable: timeline. Bulk sampling and initial concentrate production are targeted for the first half of 2026. That's not 5 years away, that's now. And in supply-constrained markets, the first producer doesn't just participate in the market, it defines it. If you zoom out, the pattern becomes clear. Antimony supply is structurally constrained. Western governments are actively funding domestic production. Defense stockpiles are being rebuilt, and the number of viable, high-grade projects in secure jurisdictions can be counted on one hand. That's how mining unicorns are born, not through speculation, but through timing, geology, and necessity. This is the hidden lesson behind every major mining cycle. Fortunes aren't made when metals are abundant. They're made when supply disappears, and the market suddenly realizes it needs something it can't easily replace. The companies positioned to fill that gap early don't just grow, they transform. The story unfolding in Alaska isn't just about one project. It's about the re-emergence of domestic supply chains for critical minerals that underpin modern civilization. It's about geopolitics reshaping geology's value overnight, and it's about understanding how structural deficits create asymmetric investment opportunities for those paying attention. If you want the full breakdown, including the geology, the volumetric model, and why this system may represent one of the most strategically significant antimony discoveries in North America, head over to juniormining.gold. We've published a complete technical report and supporting analysis. The link is in the show notes. This is Dusty Nugget. Sometimes mining isn't about striking it rich overnight. It's about seeing the long game, taking the smart risks, and engineering your way to the win. Stay bold, stay scrappy, and I'll see you at the next drill site. You can learn more at juniormining.gold. Please like, subscribe, and visit our socials or our Substack for more content.